All right, welcome everybody to another episode of Labs Talk.
We are on a roll, I suppose. We had another episode just go live this afternoon.
Yeah, exactly. So, and we talked about embodied AI, and now we talk about yet another AI topic, and it's about the developer experience. So we really seem to explore all the ways of AI, basically, and all the
Yes,
context of AI. I
it's
would like to
still the
say, right?
AI series, and we had to postpone this
Yeah.
just for a bit. We've been in touch with our guest for a couple of weeks already, but we deliberately scheduled this to record today, so we come out with this only after TechEd.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, perfect. I think we should bring Tim on. Actually, he's the perfect guest to talk about the developer experience. Let's add him. Tim, how are you doing?
Welcome, Tim. Welcome to our show.
Fine. How are you?
We're awesome, actually. So, how are you? And let's start chatting a little bit about tech at first, right? So there was this awesome technical developer experience and also show basically from SAP. Can you give us a little bit of insights what's going on at TechEd maybe first?
Yeah. First, like a very exciting keynote with loads of AI in it. A number of the things
Mhm.
that were in the keynote, I suppose we'll be talking about. Whether that's basically help for code assistance, AI code assistance, or whether that's going to be intent-based development. All this was actually shown in the keynote, and then also in several talks and hands-on. So customers,
Mhm.
partners had the possibility to actually try stuff out on their own and how this works. Yeah,
And
it's exciting.
that's an excellent way to start this episode. Here on Labs Talk, we had guests who talk about AI in discriminative industry use cases. We spoke to Adelia and Lukasz the other week for embodied AI that puts AI into robots and real world use cases. But as of today, we understand AI has the biggest impact in coding and code generation. And you're telling us all of this evolved and it has been a topic at TechEd. Maybe, Tim, allow me that question to start with a bit of a coding past to present. Where did we come from? Where are we today? And what happened? What are the new announcements about?
Yeah. Yeah. Where do we come from? I mean, probably most people that are listening in know about that. So traditionally, of course, you wrote code by typing stuff in. You had then code suggestions, like inline code suggestions and so on. And what you traditionally also have is maybe wizards and low code tools maybe on top that generate stuff for you. At SAP, for example, we not only had that, we still have that in the Business Application Studio, that you can, for example, create a Fiori-based full-stack application, so the cloud application programming model, and with our front-end technologies, UI5 and Fiori elements with wizards. And then, as I said, like normal code with code suggestions. But as probably most of you also know, since the large language models have arrived, that has also changed. That there are a lot of what you call AI coding assistants that help you generate even more code with the help of AI, right? And I suppose, again, like we are probably going deeper into how this works today.
Absolutely.
But it's basically even more suggesting of code, not just on basically just filling in kind of the things from what you started typing, but actually coming up with complete code blocks. Or by a kind of a chat interface, you basically ask for something to be created, and the AI with the coding assistant does that for you.
I suppose it's literally that coding assistant, and I have to think about that one story, that roommate that I once had in a different millennium, basically. But that role, my roommate had a job interview for an extreme programming type of setup where they ask him, "Can you work in this setup where you sit in front of a PC as two?" like one coding, the other one observing.
Mhm.
And he answered that interview question that this is fine for him as long as the other person shuts up. He obviously didn't get hired, but that would make it a lot easier for a programmer not only to generate code, but also to have this assistant, like, I don't find the mistake. Can you take a look on my behalf, maybe?
Mhm.
Yeah, that's one of the use cases. Also finding, of course, problems, refactoring code, for example,
Mhm.
right? Like a suggestion of if I have come up with something, it may be not the best way. Then actually also AI can come up with suggestions. But that's just, one of the many use cases. Another one is I keep comparing it. So when people also say, well, can I trust the code
Mhm.
that's created there, or the suggestions that come up, especially since we all know that LLMs hallucinate. It's and is this code secure, right? Like, isn't it that like loads of technical debt is created? And I keep saying, look, what developers have always done is copy code from somewhere. It's not that developers normally, also in the old days, just sat there and basically just wrote code, and by just reading documentation and then writing code, it was always like finding other projects where some problem was solved, copying
Mhm.
code over, or actually going into the internet using your favorite search engine or something like Stack Overflow or so, and finding how others solve problems and copying that code over. And, everyone would have expected that the developer actually looks at this, and then while the developer adapts the code in his or her own context, it does it. It's done in the right way, right? And it's secure. It's good code and so on. And I see the AI coding assistants in the same line. They come up with something, but of course, the developer is then in charge of
Of
checking
checking
whether
it, yeah.
this is all okay.
I mean, in theory, you should still check it, yeah. So, and let me go back to Stack Overflow a bit, because that triggered me slightly, actually, right? I think it's quite interesting for training all the LLMs on how to write code and maybe do some algorithms and stuff like that. We needed Stack Overflow, right? Because the LLMs need training data.
Mhm.
But now I believe, right? So it almost looks to me like now that we have trained LLMs that are able to autocomplete and suggest the way we write code, what's the purpose of Stack Overflow, and who in the developer community continues to go there, basically, except the LLMs, actually. So doesn't that create an interesting problem at some point, because we basically only have generated code out there at some point, which then
Which
again
is
fed into LLMs. Okay, but that's
that's probably a little bit beyond the
Yeah,
scope of this
not
episode.
only
Go ahead, Tim.
I would say it sounds like okay if no one talks about their problems anymore, right? And
Mhm.
comes up with solutions, then also LLMs can't learn anything more. But
yeah.
I guess, because this is just one of the resources. Obviously, the other resources are the huge amount of code, real code in GitHub.
Mhm.
The problems will still be solved, and the LLM will figure it out
Yeah.
itself, I suppose, right? So yeah, I mean, that might be a problem, but I'm not entirely sure, right?
Yeah.
That
Yeah. Got it.
this is actually an issue. Yeah.
All right. So then, so let's talk about modern coding, right? And that basically means, to some degree, vibe coding, I would say, right? That's how we discussed it in our pre-chat, and I think you said there's multiple level of vibe coding. So what I'm pretty much exposed to is like a cursor trial here right now, for example, where I'm basically just prompting, and then code is being written. And if I feel like I have the time, I look at the code, basically, right? But that's just one level of the whole, or one part of the whole modern coding with AI. So what other areas do you see, and can you quickly maybe outline what each of them is, basically?
Yeah, as you mentioned, I think of like the term vibe coding as a continuum, right? Like some
Mhm.
people I mean, you just said like tools like Cursor, Windsurf, GitHub Copilot, Claude Code, right? It doesn't always have to be in an IDE or an IDE itself. It can also be on the command line.
Yeah.
They already talk about this is vibe coding, what you can do with these things. And then, of course, there is other tools like that are even, I would say even more in the vibe coding area. They almost do the same stuff, which I will explain, but maybe hide a bit more stuff from you if you don't want to see it. So how can I explain that? So the term vibe coding, I suppose most people actually know the term. But for those who don't, it's not even like a year old. It was coined by Andrej Karpathy, quite an infamous and influential person in the whole AI topic, just in February in a tweet, and he was referring to basically using code assistants that come up with code and then not really check in, just what you just said, right?
Okay.
Not really check in the outcome that much and just letting the thing go on its own, right? And this is where the terms come from. And when we talk about various degrees, it's like, okay, you ask the LLM to do something, and some tools do that and basically ask you for acceptance for each step, for each of the tasks that when you voiced your intent, right? So I'm using this intent for the first time, but you voice your intent, and that might be several that might translate into several tasks, and then each of these tasks like come up with a code change, maybe in different files, and then you see these files. And you confirm them. That's normally the right thing, and you look at them at least somehow, right, or at the result. And then, of course, and that's what you already mentioned. As you feel like this is good, this is getting better and better, you might actually not check that much anymore. But there are huge discussions about this. I can say I have that on a daily basis. Just to be honest with you, we had like almost a heated discussion about that yesterday, because the quality is so varying, right? And sometimes, the LLM comes up with something that, like the first thing it does come up with is actually not on the right path. And if you're not careful and you just go with it, you vibe, right? In terms of don't look at that.
Go with the flow.
It will eventually get something to run, but that might not be a good result. And there are a lot of people that are really skeptical. And then there's the other end, which says, well, that thing, we will not need developers anymore in a foreseeable amount of time. And as usual, I think the right is somewhere in between, right? And that's how we have to see it. We have to try and push like things in a direction that you don't need to check less and less. It becomes better and better and more reliable each day. But we should not at this point actually try to convey that, oh, you just need to type in something and then you go away for half an hour and it's finished. It might be finished, but it might also be really bad what the outcome is.
That's, by the way, that's what I just very quickly, that's what I heard people doing actually, right? They start background tasks, they go for Starbucks, get a coffee basically, they come back, see the result, and quite often it works basically, and they've more or less done the job more or less while having a coffee. So, but that's what I heard.
But then again, the social internet is more or less full with memes about vibe coding, cleanup engineering, job descriptions, and that kind of stuff. And where developers sit in front of a PC and mocking that scene where the developer just tries to resize a button and it doesn't work, and all of that. That's
and I can give you also an example, really, like where we, with the cloud application programming model, we have some common thing where the LLMs, and I can I can just name, I would say the two that when it comes to coding are up there. They both get something wrong. You say, for example, I want to do something with risk management, and then it decides to create like a CAP project, to scaffold a CAP project, but decides to do that in a way there is something from CAP which says add sample. And that add sample is meant to create a CAP project with a working example, which is a bookshop scenario. So people that want to learn can learn. But of course, if you're saying create a CAP application for risk management, adding a sample that is a bookstore and that's the first step, right? It's already wrong. So the next couple of minutes, the LLM is also busy to delete the stuff it had actually accidentally added. And that's a common thing, right? And you can imagine that a lot of things can go wrong in that direction. So,
but to only to get back to that term intent that you mentioned when you spoke about that, there is approaches out in the market to make this more intent-led. I saw a Amazon, I don't know whether it's a product, AWS product. I think it went by the name Kito.
Kiro.
Kiro, exactly. The way I understood that takes a lot of requirements, much like a product manager, and tries to give that to an LLM in a way that it can tick all the requirements by doing so. And I think that's very much in line with what you were.
That's one of the degrees, right? Like it's a good segue now to this intent-based development, and it's one of the degrees I would like to outline again. What's the difference between this, basically using just kind of a coding assistant in an IDE or on the command line. You also voice some intent, but you might be very specific. For example, I might actually say what I just mentioned, create a risk management application using CAP. I'm saying use CAP. And then I say, create, a UI5 application on top of it. I know about the technologies. I know what I want to do. And so I also voice my intent, but it's still has a lot of guidance from a technology point of view. What everyone dreams about is that I only voice the requirement. I actually maybe even have no technical background. There's just a requirement, and then something translates this requirement into a technical specification. So they call it, either intent-based development and then also spec-driven development. And that actually, so something in between, I would call it like a AI or virtual solution architect, translates your requirement into what the different technical outcomes should be for that. And these then are, as a next step, taken again by an LLM and implemented. But so if you climb up the vibe coding ladder, so to speak, you less and less say something about the technology used for it. You just say the requirement, right?
Which is another great segue to climb up that ladder. There is a gradient between the technology and customer demand, more or less, and there is a lot of non-technical information around in a typical organization that is not so much related to code to start with. What I'm trying to get to, there is, say, support ticket systems, there is wikis, there is email channels that has information flowing back from customers. Is there anything that current AI coding systems to support that or to connect that?
Yes, there are. I mean, of course, like the things that you are saying are basically not the ones where the LLMs can be trained on, right? Because that's not information that the crawlers, for example, could get to. But if you want to connect your coding assistant or your large language model to such resources, there is something called, that's been around for quite a while, retrieval augmented generation RAG, right? So you can actually add such documents to whatever the task is that the user asked. And usually the way that works, you have obviously this set of resources, and then you have the user demand, and derived from that user demand with the search in a vector database, you get the parts of whatever information it is that kind of fit or seem to fit that ask, and that you pass back as a context to the large language model, if that's what you asked. Like, yeah.
I think the other topic we should also talk about in this context here when it comes to vibe coding is probably MCP, right? So that's where as a model context protocol, right, has been a huge hype also since the beginning of the year, I would say, right? And it's I think predominantly used to kind of give the LLM some context, right? Because the LLM is trained on some Stack Overflow code, but it has no clue about my Jira tickets, for example, or something else that goes on, right? So can
Yeah,
you explain a bit how MCP relates to the whole vibe coding?
yeah, MCP could relate. I mean, MCP is also a possibility, yeah, to solve the particular problem that you just mentioned, maybe like even something like your tickets and so on. But what MCP is, and you mentioned again, it's like this is about a year old. It came up from Anthropic as a proposal last November, and everyone really jumped on it. It's basically, I compare it to, I mean, there's many ways to compare it, but what it is, it's like giving basically the LLMs an option to call tools, and the tools could be anything. Or you could also say giving the LLM some arms and legs to interact with, for example, the environment.
Wait.
Wait,
Arms and
wait.
legs, we just had an episode about embodied AI. It actually will go live
Like,
in.
that literally happens.
Yeah.
It's not just a phrase.
It has real arms and legs, basically. Okay.
Okay.
We were staying in the kind of virtual arms and legs.
Okay. Yeah, we are in the virtual one. Yeah, just a comparison there. And so you can, for example, access the file system, read and write into the file system, databases, and so on. And if you'd like, if someone writes an MCP server like that, you could also go to Jira tickets, for example, and search in there. And but that's just one of the many use cases for MCP. It would be providing additional context for a given task, but it can also be some completely different stuff like generating code, for example, clicking on something on your computer, right, on behalf of the LLM. It can be a lot of things. Any tool that you can come up with, right, is MCP.
I guess when it comes to SAP and our own MCP servers, which we have a few, right? So we can talk about them in a second. They can not just basically access code or access data, or so they can basically do things for us, right? So for example, there's the CUP MCP, UI5, and Fiori. Those are the 3 MCPs, I believe. Can you quickly outline what these MCPs are doing for the developers in the SAP ecosystem?
What we did, I mean, we are in a really nice position with UI5, Fiori elements, and CUP, also to various degrees, that the large language models, the modern ones, actually have a good deal of an idea about these things already. So it's possible to use AI coding assistance without any SAP help meanwhile, and you can call it, for example, and have voice the intent again and say, create a CUP application and UI5 or Fiori Elements application on top of it. And there's a very good chance that it will come up with something that actually works with CUP, UI5, and Fiori Elements. So, and that's just what the LLMs are trained on. But, what I just mentioned at the very beginning, the problem with adding a bookshop to it, that's where the LLMs still get it wrong. Or have a, maybe not too much stuff to actually be trained on. For example, in Fiori Elements, you have annotations. There's a couple of UI annotations. It doesn't really know too well about it, and then it comes up with something. And that, in these respects, we've created MCP servers that help the large language models actually to do their job. And we give them either additional context, so they would know how to do a task, or we actually, ask the LLM to come up with a task and then create the code through the MCP servers.
Okay. Yeah. So it's either basically generating some code in this case, or it's basically giving the LLM the option to do something that it would otherwise not even be able to do because it's somewhere on your file system.
Or it wouldn't know it too well, right?
Yeah.
Like for example, the CAP MCP server, it's mostly about helping or give the LLM more context.
Okay.
So you could compare it like the LLM is a kind of general expert, but he has some general knowledge, but it's not the expert, right? And then the MCP server for CAP is basically a proposal for the LLM to say, well, what is your current task? If you tell me your current task, I'll give you some documentation back and some code snippets that help you doing this task. And that's what's happening. And then it gets this additional information, the additional code, and from that, it is able to actually generate the code. So in the CAP case, all the code is still generated by the LLM, but it gets an additional manual to do that more or less. In other cases, like UI5 or Fiori Elements, there's also this additional layer where you can say, well, in Fiori Elements, you could say, create a complete list report with an object page. And then it basically generates the code instead of the LLM, right? So there's various things that these MCP servers do. Yeah.
Cool. But they all basically make our life as developers basically
Exactly.
easier. And before we go into the outlook now, actually, there's one topic that I kind of spontaneously came up a little bit with during the flow of our conversation now, and that's basically how it democratizes coding, I believe, right? Because I mean, Andreas, you're product manager, for example, right? But I could well imagine actually you with a tool like Cursor, for example, yeah, you're able to write your requirements, right?
I did
So
speak about that in our sister project a while ago.
Yeah, totally. And now I just wanted to bring up this topic and also ask you for your opinion on this, Tim, because I think a tool like Cursor or even like higher level, I think you mentioned Replit or all the other provide coding tools, right? I mean, in the end, we use English as a programming language, right? So we write some, I want to have a mobile application that collects this and that, basically, right? So this is also empowering a completely new dimension of users, actually, which is quite interesting, right? So the business user, and I think we talked a lot about this actually when it comes to a low code, no code, for example, in that era, if you want, right? We also talked about empowering other user groups and stuff like that. I think this is also happening, or am I wrong here? So
No, it's happening. Again, huge discussions about like where this goes and how well this works. What's definitely happening is, and I mean, no one would deny that this is a good thing, that maybe not completely technical people, let's call it like that, rather than just only writing down stuff, can also come up with a first prototype and make it very tangible what you want. Like, it's also more than just a screenshot or something, just a wireframe or something. It actually something that you can work with. Where of course there are huge discussions is how much is this more than a prototype? How much can you hand this over to a developer then? Or I mean, in some people's minds, this is not only a prototype. This is actually the product. But I think that's a far stretch. What's probably your best case is that you can somehow hand this over, and real developers then do the gory details, maybe also, or very possible also with the help of AI coding assistants. But it's like, again, all shades of gray, and I'm following a lot of discussions about this in the area, not only within SAP. You get kinds of like, everyone, some people that completely dismiss the whole idea, and just say this is a prototype at max, right? Not more. Others, think of handing it over to development, and others like hope this is the final product. And again, we are trying to push obviously the boundaries to at least handing it over and to pro development. And or maybe when handing it over, it means like sounds like, well, one person does one thing and the other does another. That might be a thing, like you said. A PM might create a first version, and the developer then takes it over and makes this a product. But it might also be the same persona. If I'm a developer, I don't want to, a simple CRUD application to start off with. These days, I really don't want to spend a lot of time coming up with this first CRUD application with the first kind of normal set of functionalities. I would like to do that in a couple of minutes, and the AI to do it for me, to then follow up with the normal development. Right? This would be
quite interesting. Really cool.
Yeah.
Anything to add?
No, nothing in particular to add, but this handover that has been very front and center to product management as such, whereas I agree there is many shades of gray in between. What I did use it for is just to create literally something to hand over, to show to engineering what I want. Like, if you click here, this happens, and to have this not just in a PowerPoint, but something clickable. Like, obviously the data in that prototype didn't make any sense, but that made it very easy for me to hand that over to engineering, and everybody was like, yeah, okay, that makes sense. Now we only have to bring the data in, but that's what it made it easy to hand this off.
Yeah,
not in terms of code, but in terms of to pass the idea along.
Absolutely, yeah.
Right, cool. Then let's maybe come to our last section here, which is a bit talking about Outlook and the future, of course, right? So right now we're riding this vibe coding wave. What could be the next level, actually, right? So we spoke about LLMs writing code, and now we have MCP servers or MCP tools maybe helping the LLMs, and then some companies train their own LLMs, actually, right? So is this the next level then, basically, to just train the LLM directly on the code, or what?
Yeah, it's one of the things. The next level is like what we just basically talked about, is still creating these kind of, you could say, vibe coding tools where you at least start your journey, where you or basically create maybe a prototype or something to hand over for development, and that also across technologies, right? Within SAP, we have so many technologies, and what we call solutions sometimes might consist out of an application with the back end and the front end, but also maybe a process, right? Maybe something that runs in the cloud. Another part is still on premise, kind of a connector to it, and so on. So to create these kind of solutions with a vibe coding like tool, but that comes up with normal code that at any point you can then actually, work on outside of that tool. So that's the one thing. And the other, you already mentioned, is obviously training, fine-tuning specialized models, right? What I just mentioned, for example, to make it more tangible, the large language models know about so-called UI annotations for Fiori elements, but there is a lot to still learn for them.
Yeah.
And, we can make that much better. And this is something that we probably look into in the future already now, to be honest, to enhance actually the SAP specifics on top of the large language models that are already out there.
Yeah. And what was announced at TechEd was there's RPT1. I think it's pronounced Rapid One, right? I think if I understand this correctly, it's more or less for tabular data and kind of coming up with the next number or so. And
That's more on data, right? That's not on code. That's on data, actually, to make predictions with that. But it was also talked about, and it goes in the direction what I said is the ABAP one, right? That is actually trained on ABAP. So with ABAP, it's anyway the LLMs do not have enough insight into ABAP. It's also very hard for LLMs sometimes. There is a lot of the code that's out there. Sometimes it's old ABAP code, sometimes it's new ABAP code, and it's not so easy for large language models to distinguish what's old and what's new. And of course, these kind of things we can actually improve, right?
And the reason that that SAP has to work on something like ABAP 1, for example, is mainly, I guess, that there's not enough publicly available code for this, basically, right? So a lot of this ABAP code, I guess, must be hidden in proprietary projects with customers, right? That are typically not exposed to the general public and to the internet, I guess. And so it makes sense to actually create a specialized model, because by scanning the public internet, you will just not get enough code, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a big part of the reason. And what I said on top of it, if it's then available, is it ABAP cloud programming model, or is it like old classic ABAP, right?
Yeah.
All these things make it harder. Yeah.
All right, cool.
Cool insights, Tim. Thank you so much for sharing.
Perfect. Yeah. If there's nothing to add, I would say thank you so much, Tim. That was really an exciting episode again, talking about the developer experience, right? Like the other side of the whole, or maybe the beginning of all these cool AI use cases that we've discussed before, actually. Thanks so much, and talk soon again.
Thank you so much, Tim.
For having me.
Ciao.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye-bye.